Welcome everyone to Buffalo, to Mayor Byron Brown, to County Executive Mark Polencars, to all the elected officials who are with us today. Thank you very much for participating. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person. I was very much looking forward to it. This is a very important conference. It's a very important time. And I appreciate your letting me appear by this video. I apologize for the inconvenience. Sandy is going into the hospital today, and I want to be with her, and that's why I'm not with you. And I know these videos can be very boring and tough to look at, but think of it this way, at least this way you don't have to hear any more of Howard Zemsky's jokes, which I know can get very burdensome over time. I'm glad that this is happening in Buffalo. Buffalo, as you know, has had an extraordinary recovery, but it's not just a New York recovery story. It is literally a national model of recovery. I spent many years in the federal government, as you know, at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the whole question was, could you take these older industrial cities and turn them around? And frankly, we didn't have a lot of success doing that. Buffalo is the shining example in opposition. Where a city that many believe did not have a future but only a past has actually turned around. Now, when you look at Buffalo, it can be intimidating, frankly. The accomplishments are so grand. You look at Riverbend and you say, how could you ever duplicate that in your city, your town, your region? I don't think that's the question. I wouldn't look at just what Buffalo has done. More, I would look at how it has done it. And what I find extraordinary and what I think has made Buffalo a success is the partnership that they developed among governments and between government and the private sector, and the change in attitude in Buffalo. And I'm going to speak more about it, but there is a big factor here in the attitude of the people and the institutions in that place. Now, before we talk about going forward, let's just quickly talk about how we got here. Let's make sure we understand the problem before we try to craft a solution. And, my way is to be honest and frank and candid about the problem, because if you're not honest about the problem, you're not going to fashion the right solution, and denial is not a life strategy. Upstate New York has had a totally different economic trajectory than downstate New York. In many ways, they've been polar opposites. What happened in upstate New York? Fundamentally, the economy changed. That's true. And we had nothing to do with the change in the economy. That was the cycle. Upstate New York was a manufacturing economy. It was the Erie Canal. It was the Barge Canal. And that's what upstate New York was. That business changed. It moved overseas. That we had nothing to do with. However, we didn't change with the economy. Not that it was an easy task, but that was the necessary task. We were in the manufacturing economy, fine. That moved. What's the economy of tomorrow? And what's our new line of business? And how do we make that transformation? And how do we fund and finance that transformation? That is where New York State lost a lot of ground. Compounding that problem was the state was one of the highest tax states in the United States. And everything people had been saying for decades was true. People are more mobile. Businesses are more mobile. And if you're one of the highest tax states, people and businesses will move. They did. On top of that, you had a state government that really wasn't present for upstate New York. Our legislature is primarily downstate, if you look at the numbers. Our upstate legislature is really divided among the cities. We have a Buffalo contingent, a Rochester contingent, a Utica contingent, etc. But you don't have the same legislative heft that you have in downstate, just in terms of numbers. So the state was not responsive to upstate New York in the way they should have been, in my opinion. And that went on for many years. And what the state did do was misguided. When the state did economic development, they thought the way to do it was for Albany to tell Buffalo what projects they should be doing. That didn't work. That's not how the economy works anymore. There is no top-down macro state economy. There are regional economies, 10 regional economies across the state that are going to work or not, but that's going to happen from the bottom up. Also, fundamentally, the state facilitated the economic decline of upstate New York, in my opinion, by putting economic band-aids on financial bullet wounds. The state was, in essence, subsidizing the upstate cities and the upstate schools to an unsustainable level. The state pays roughly 40% of the cost of local government in upstate New York. And that percent has been going up and up. And the local governments have been asking for more and more every year. Now, I understand the local government's problem. The population upstate has been shrinking. People have been leaving. That leaves fewer people to pay for the cost of government. And at the same time, the local governments have continued to grow. So you have fewer and fewer people paying for more and more government. The local governments were then stressed. They then go to the state and ask for a subsidy. That has been the cycle that we are in. That is a losing cycle. Because if the state starts subsidizing or continues subsidizing the upstate local governments, certainly if the state increases the subsidy to the local governments upstate, it means the state is going to have to raise taxes. And if the state raises taxes, then this is a vicious cycle and a downward spiral. Because the raising of state taxes is one of the reasons why people were leaving. That has been the negative synergy, if you will, that's been going on in New York. And it's been causing more and more people to leave, which has fewer and fewer people paying for local government, and that's the cycle. That's what has to stop, and that's what we have stopped. The answer is this. The local governments in upstate New York have to be economically viable. How do they do that? There's only two options. Either you cut expenses or you increase revenues. Cutting government costs isn't easy. I know, we've done it. The state government has kept growth under 2% every year that I've been governor. But it's hard. Cutting government costs means innovations like government consolidation, government mergers, difficult politically, but necessary. So either you cut costs for government or you increase revenues for government. And that's the option we're talking about today. How do you increase government revenues? You bring in new businesses, you create new jobs, you have new taxpayers. And that's what Buffalo has done. It is increasing its revenue by increasing businesses, increasing jobs. And that is a formula that will work. Again, not easy, but it's a success. So the state's course is to use state money to help local governments develop sustainable economies and to stop subsidizing the decline, but rather financing the growth. That is the state model that we're talking about today, and that has worked so well. Also, remember in upstate New York, something else happened, which is something we still have to deal with, although it's getting much, much better. When you had this sustained period of decline in upstate New York, it generated a negativity in terms of attitude and mindset. I've told you this before, but when I was at HUD for 8 years, we were doing economic development all across the country, and I sat through 9 million, it seems, economic development conferences. But the best economic development speech I ever heard is what I refer to as the taxi cab speech. And that point was simple but profound. The attitude and belief of the locality communicates. And if the locality is negative, that communicates. If the locality is positive, that communicates. And the speech was about a businessman who comes into town, lands at the airport, and gets in the cab and says to the cab driver, "How are things going here?" And the cab driver starts to talk. And if the cab driver says, "Oh, it's terrible, the mayor this, the county executive this business just moved out, the sports team this," that communicates. The businessman goes to a restaurant and orders a meal and says to the waitress, "How are things going?" And what that taxi cab person communicates, what that waitress communicates, what that front page of the newspaper communicates, that is very, very important. And that is a positive message of hope and growth and belief in the region is important. Buffalo, when I talk about the changing attitude in Buffalo, that's the most profound change. When I tell you as little as 5 years ago, you walk down the street in Buffalo and you ask anyone, if you had asked anyone on the street, "How are things going?" you would have had a negative answer. Today, I believe the chances are you're going to have a positive answer. And that's Buffalo, which had a very long period of decline. But it shows you how the attitude can actually change. Statewide, we've been making the changes that we need to make on a macro level. We've changed the statewide environment. We're changing the perception of New York as an anti-business state. And we're changing that perception by changing the reality. We have cut taxes all across the board. First, we cut government spending, limiting it to below 2%, lowest level in modern political history. When you reduce spending, you can reduce taxes, and we have. Middle class taxes down to the lowest level since the 60s, corporate taxes down, manufacturing down to the lowest level since 1917, the manufacturing tax. And we've coupled it with a very aggressive marketing campaign, New York Open for Business, reaching out. So the macro has been done, but the way the economy works is through regional economies. And that's our Regional Economic Development Council approach, and that's what you're all a part of. You're going to see in this state a disparity in regional growth over the years, I believe, because that's how economies now work. It'll not just be the downstate economy versus the upstate economy. You'll see variations within the upstate economy. You'll see Buffalo doing well and other regions not doing as well. So the responsibility for economic growth really is turning more to a regional responsibility than it has been in the past. You have these micro economies that are developing, and it really is fascinating, but I believe that's the adaptation that we have to make in the state of New York, and our regional councils are the step in that direction. And it asks the hard questions to that region. We talked about the economy of yesterday for your region. What is your economy of tomorrow? What is your business plan? Have you coordinated with your governments? Are they part of the problem or are they part of the solution? Is your county and your city and your town working together? Have they got their costs down? Because these governmental distinctions are really artificial. It's about economic units, and the region is one economic unit, and the economy does not respect the line between the city and the county. The economy demands that they work together as a region. The REDCs are in competition. I believe in competition. Some people say, well, just give us a check. I'm not doing that. This is taxpayers' money, and taxpayers' money is precious. And I believe the competition has caused the regions to bring their game up. And before the state of New York signs a check, I want to know what it's for. Because we're working very hard to get costs down in this state. And this is a lot of money. And it's a lot of money that we're not spending elsewhere and that we're not giving back to the taxpayer. So I want to make sure this is the best use of money that is possible. The key to winning this competition is laugh at Howard Zemsky's jokes. I know that's hard. Second key is this is a competition that is going to look for specific transactions with a specific private sector partner that will develop jobs. This is not a build it and they will come. We tried that, they didn't come. This is posing a specific question. If you win the competition and you get this funding, what business partners will you invest in? What will they contribute? How many jobs will that generate? And how is that in furtherance of your regional vision for your cluster economy? That's the bottom line $64,000 question. In this case, it's a $500 million question. But that is the question. Do not give us a plan that says we're going to build these roads and build this factory and build this building, and we believe if we build the factory, a tenant will materialize. We want to do it the other way around. And when you're looking at Buffalo, you will see we did not put a shovel in the ground until we had a specific transaction, a specific business deal that we were pursuing. Also, one of the keys here is be innovative. What this competition has done over the years, it has brought everybody's game up. I can tell you that. If you look at the applications from last year, they are much more sophisticated economic development plans than they were just 4 years ago. You have these regional councils that have now been together and have been working and have invested a lot of money, and they are growing, and they're getting more and more sophisticated. So be innovative. Also look at the governmental models that you're posing. We've been working very hard on the state level to advance consolidations, mergers, et cetera. As I mentioned, it is very, very hard, and we're going to continue to push. But that could be an exciting part of this application. And look at what's working around the state. You'll see these are all outside the box solutions. There are very few traditional parochial approaches, proposals that have worked. Most of these, if I had described them to you, you would have said they were too futuristic. You go to the Capital District region that has now become the nanotech capital of the world. Our resident economic visionary, Dr. Calleros, who had a vision for a new economic future built on the asset of the SUNY system, because most future visions are built on the present asset. And he took that SUNY system in Albany, now expanding it across the state, and he has made it the base of a nanotechnology explosion. Look at Buffalo, which had a history of providing clean energy, Niagara Falls, now the Riverbend Solar City project, a future filled with potential. Rochester, big award in photonics. Vice President Biden was in town in Rochester announcing they won a national award. Syracuse, the Inner Harbor rebirth, people swimming in Lake Onondaga. If you had talked about that just a few years ago, they would have laughed at you. Mohawk Valley, we're now talking about Nano Utica. North Country is doing fantastic. Fort Drum is growing. Clarkson and Trudeau are innovation hubs. So all these regional, out-of-the-box, creative, exciting developments on top of the statewide economic initiatives, like our investment in tourism, which has been a record investment and has reaped record dividends with record growth. This state is now number 2 in job growth in the nation, and all the arrows are positioned in the right direction. We went from a $10 billion deficit just a few years ago to a $5 billion surplus, 600,000 new jobs. The state government is working. We're passing budgets on time. We're cutting taxes. So we're doing what we have to do on the state level. But, as I mentioned before, it's going to be region by region. And it is going to be up to you. It is going to be a regional success backed by a macro policy on the state level that is facilitating. But it's going to be up to that region. Also, my last point, this is a precious opportunity. This is $1.5 billion in a competition. I don't know that we'll ever be lucky enough to see this kind of opportunity again. $1.5 billion is a lot of money for a state government. We have it because we had a surplus this past year because of our belt tightening, etc. But we also have it because we were able to convince the state legislature to fund $1.5 billion for upstate New York. And that was a very difficult undertaking, I can promise you that. So use this opportunity. This is not going to be a recurring program. We couldn't afford it, and we couldn't get it done. So I would consider this a unique opportunity. And the winners are going to win $500 million. Now, to give you an idea of what $500 million means, everything you saw today in Buffalo, all that investment, all that growth, all that energy, all that excitement, that was with $500 million in commitments. That's what the state has committed thus far to Buffalo. So, Buffalo, that had one of the slowest economies in the state, which on the numbers had the slowest economy in this state, which was larger than many other jurisdictions. That phenomenal turnaround was done with $500 million. So imagine what you can do with $500 million and what you can do for your region. And while you have that imagination working, bring your economic imagination to the table, because this is going to be about your creativity, your energy, with your vision for your future. The New York economy is on fire. Use this moment to light up your region. I know you will. Thank you for listening.